Hi there. In this video we'll be covering how long should a book manuscript be. Some of the most famous books of all time are only 75 or 100 pages long. Other ones are thousands of pages long. Let's find the length that's right for you. By the end of this video you'll learn the connection between a book's genre and length, how to write to the length your story needs, and how to keep your reader in mind. And stay tuned until the end of the video for an opportunity I really think you're going to enjoy. Let's dive in. When thinking about your book length, it really depends. It's super interesting to consider the fact that some books have such a wide range of book length, even within the same genre. I mean, you could write a biography of a famous person and have it be 25,000 words or 125,000 words. I think most books today, given the attention span and given the reader focus, I think most books today are about, we'll say 30 to 50,000 words in length, maybe 40 to 55, somewhere in that range. And I go back on all the books I've written or ghostwritten, more than 30 at this point, and I think the average is about 40,000 words. And there's so much you can convey in 40,000 words. There's so much that you can say. There's so many lessons that you can share. And it gives the reader something actionable, something achievable. The longest book I've written was a biography about a baseball player named Ken Caminiti, Playing Through the Pain, and it is 130,000 words. I felt like I needed to put all that stuff in there. His life was interesting, tragic, fascinating to me. And I did a lot of research to write his story. Yeah, I had people along the way telling me like, oh, you could cut it at 75. I was like, I'm only getting started at 75. At the same time, I've worked on other books that felt long at 60,000 words, felt long at 70,000 words. It really depends. It really depends on the story you're telling and the genre. When you think about self-help and popular books, I would say less is more. Simplify your message, clarify your message, make it as simple as possible. Keep it to 100 or 150 pages, And a lot of time it's interesting to think about word count and pages. When people ask me how long a book is, I go to word count, but a lot of times when people are thinking about a book, they're thinking about pages. When I focus on a baseline, I really think about 25,000 words because at 25,000 words, you can have a nice spine to your book. How's the book gonna look on a bookshelf? If it's too thin, it's gonna look like a pamphlet. You want it to look like a book. You want it to have some heft and some weight to it. So I would say baseline is 25 to 30,000 words. But at the same time, again, there's some books that go hundreds of thousands of words, and it can be a lot to read a long book. But I know people who do it. So it depends. Some fiction series go on and on and on, and these books are hundreds of pages long, and people love them. So who knows? It's really up for what you as the reader are interested in. For a fiction book or a deeply researched book, 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 or more, maybe that's something you're interested in. So it really depends on the reader, depends on what they're trying to take out of it, and the genre as well. Ultimately, when you're thinking about your book length, write to the length that your story needs. Who's to say what is right or wrong? It really is up to you to figure out how complete your book is. Make your book feel complete and authoritative without worrying about the word count. Again, going back to my Ken Caminiti book, I was keeping track on the length of each chapter in word count, but I wasn't keeping track of the overall. I was just recognizing, oh, this is done, this is done, this is done. And then I got to the end of the draft and I tabulated the word count, and it was 135,000 words. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is too long. So I trimmed some text, added back an epilogue later, so it evened out. But it was interesting for me to look at it that way and say, well, I wrote to the story. If you write to the story, your book is always going to feel complete when it's done. So don't worry so much about following the word count and thinking, okay, I hit 40,000 words, I'm done. Maybe your story needs more than that. Maybe you need to go deeper on certain stories. Maybe you need to tighten things up. Don't worry about writing to a specific word count. Worry about writing the best possible story. And then you can always adjust it or edit it later. With book writing, the way I focus on it is quality over quantity. Make the quality of your pages and sentences and words stand out. Make every word count. You don't want to waste words. You don't want to throw things away. You don't want to have add-ons. You don't want to have half a book be an encyclopedia entry on something. You want it to be standing alone by itself. Here's your book, here's your message. Whatever the length is, great. If it feels complete to you, let it be. Don't worry about adding stuff to make it look better or, trying to design it in a way that's going to, add to the page count to make it feel more complete to you. Don't worry about that. All these things are going to fall into focus. And if the book feels complete to the reader, it's going to be a great read for them. They're not going to worry about that. Oh, they padded this thing. They added all this stuff at the end to make it look like there's more here. They don't want that. They don't want the story. Just give them the story at the length that it needs to be. Another thing to keep in mind too is that you can always have add-ons. You can always have things that aren't in the book that you put online. Maybe there's a workbook element that you want to add. Maybe there's stories that didn't quite fit into the book that you can write as blog posts and post online. Like, there's so many opportunities to have that added value, that add-on, that aren't in the book themselves, that you pull out of the book, but then include somewhere else. So if the book is becoming overlong or the book is becoming unwieldy, tighten it back, pull out the things that don't need to be there, and incorporate them somewhere else, because they have value, they have use, and your reader should be able to get those messages, but maybe it doesn't belong in the book itself. At the end of the day, it's so important to keep your reader in mind. Keep the reader in mind, understand what the reader journey looks like for them. If they're engaged, even if you have a 300,000 word book, they're going to want to keep going because they love the story and they love the book. And maybe if you have that super long book, maybe you break it up into multiple books instead of one big book. It can be interesting to think about that. Interesting to think about how you can do different things with this book. It doesn't need to be this. It can be this, 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 and this. And that now you have a series. So instead of just writing and writing and writing and focusing on yourself as the author, keep the reader in mind. Keep the reader journey in mind. Keep the reader at the front of mind, and you're going to write a reader-focused book, a book that somebody is going to be interested in picking up and learning from and reviewing. You want the reader to be there. You don't want to just write a challenging book that they're not going to get. You want to write a book that the reader is going to be excited about and that they're going to be engaged by and want to keep reading. So keep the reader journey in mind, and you're going to end up writing a book that will resonate with readers. If you want to learn more about how long should a book manuscript be, you should definitely check out another video I recorded. I'll link to it on the screen. It's called "What are the first steps in writing a book?" In that video, I focus on the power of purpose, book foundation work, and all the things that you need to do before you even write a single word of your book in order to have success. Remember, a good book can change your life. I'm Dan Good. Thanks for watching.